The year was 1997. It was a decade before YouTube. Even Google wouldn't launch for another year and a half. Where did collectors get their information? One place: ToyFare the Magazine. We're going to go through ToyFare's entire history, interviewing former editor Zach Oat to discover how a magazine filled with fart jokes could come to define an era and launch another pop culture phenomenon. Hey y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics history and action figures. I read every issue of ToyFare cover to cover as they came out. The magazine had a little bit of everything, from the latest toy news to articles on the history of previous lines to offers for exclusive action figures, of which I picked up quite a few, and we're going to take a peek at them in a bit. It even had a Beanie Babies price guide for a while. But it shaped my view of this hobby, showing that you could take action figure collecting seriously, appreciating the skill and craftsmanship behind the making of these figures, and connecting to the lore behind the characters, all while still having fun. Despite being best remembered for slapstick and off-color humor, ToyFare was the definitive place for breaking action figure news. With a peak monthly circulation of 120,000 copies, this was where fans found out about new releases in those early internet days. Their great relationships with the toy companies also allowed for exclusive reveals, which featured gorgeous product photography. A highlight of each year was the issue dedicated to showcasing all the new product revealed at New York International Toy Fair. Yep, that's where the name came from. An era where companies would unleash most of their product lines all at once. It was the closest thing those of us who grew up in the 70s had to getting our Sears wish books back. Once the business was out of the way, it was time to have some fun, and it certainly seemed like the guys at Toy Fair were having fun. Over time, the writers and editors almost became characters in the mag, with the adventures around the Toy Fair offices becoming the stuff of legend. So I figured I'd go straight to the source and ask someone who lived it. Guys, I am here with Zach Oat, who is currently the marketing supervisor for Diamond Select. But for our purposes, he is one of the former editors of Toy Fair magazine. Zach, thanks so much for being with us.
No, thank you for having me.
What was the work environment like? Because one of the things about Toy Fair was you got to know the people that worked on the magazine. I mean, you guys appeared in the magazine. We would see your headshots. Y'all were all characters. And there was a sense as a reader that it was almost like what the Marvel bullpen pretended to be in the 1960s, this like bastion of activity where everybody's coming and going and interacting and stuff. But it seems like that actually was the case. Is that what it was like actually working on the magazine?
Yeah. I mean, the Wizard bullpen was kind of central, but around the outside of it, there was the Toy Fair office, there was the Inquest office, there was the Anime Insider office, and we all interacted constantly. You know, the Wizard guys contributed to ideas for the Toy Fair and vice versa. I did some writing for Wizard every now and again, especially when they wanted something about toys. For a while there's an annual costume contest. There was an annual. Everybody would dress up every year for Halloween. There was scavenger hunts for a few years there when I started, and there was pranks that we would do between the two of them. The editor-in-chief, Pat McCallum, was like the mastermind behind everything. He led the prank war. We filled the Wizard bullpen with cups of water, so they had to remove all the cups of water in order to do any work, which was tremendously time-consuming. But they also wrapped our office entirely in tinfoil. It was also time-consuming to undo.
The pranks became so intense, editor Matt Seinrich wrote an editorial about them in issue 18, where he confessed to wrapping every single item in the office: action figures, pens, individual sheets of paper, in saran wrap. He was later treated to an X-Lax brownie. But this good-natured fun also led to lasting friendships.
We would all get together on weekends and go get together and watch movies together. It was called the Manly Movie Mama Jamma, and it was we did it for probably did at least 15, 20 of them, where it was three different movies that we would watch over the course of the night, and they all had some sort of united theme, like the Warriors, Road Warrior, and Roadhouse. We watched the three of those one night, and it was a good time. We would go to the toy stores every day at lunch, almost every day at lunch. We'd go to either Toys R Us or KB or GameStop, Electronics Boutique, I guess it was back in the day. We would go lots of different places just hunting for toys. almost every day after work. Um, for a while there, we were playing video games. So I would play Halo with like seven other guys. We had two TVs all hooked up. Sometimes we have more TVs in another room. And we would just go around shooting each other, on different maps and stuff. And it was fun just hanging out with the guys and doing that stuff.
That fun was evident throughout the whole magazine, even on the letters pages, where one letter a month would be answered by a dog.
One of my favorite things in the letters column was, and I when I found one of these at a store, I had to get it for myself. What did I do with it? Oh, I put it over here. Um, Zach Malamute, remember Zach Malamute?
Absolutely.
He was a freelance writer's pet dog, and he would answer the letters in the letters column. And then at one point, he ran away, and he was replaced with Zach Beanie Mute. And so Zach Beanie was this like highly educated, like very snarky, very snooty stuffed animal who answered letters and would make fun of the people. And he would get the letters from Zach Malamute from wherever he was in the country, and then he would answer them in like really meanly. Um, but uh, but no, the letters column was a lot of fun.
I was going through older issues, and there's so many little sneaky things in there. Like you've got the indica where you have like the list of all the staffers, and every single month there's some snarky little comment or some little pun or something funny in there. And it really reminded me of when I was a little kid reading Mad Magazine and just all the jokes that were in the panel borders and everything. Was that a specific influence on you guys? I mean, you probably grew up around the same era of reading Mad. I think it probably permeated, some of your humor.
Yeah, I definitely grew up reading Mad Magazine, but that's high praise saying that it was at all similar to Mad Magazine. We wanted every page to be fun, so that was why we had the word balloons. The masthead, where all the names were, was probably the last thing in the magazine that was like very serious. So you have to make it not that you want people to read it, but you want to reward somebody who did read it. Yeah, I mean, aside from the ads, we thought very hard about each page and what was going to go on it, and what was going to be entertaining about it. We tried to have a word balloon on almost every page, unless it was like a really serious editorial thing that wasn't going to work.
Perhaps some of the most off color humor was found in the monthly price guide in the form of big shots. So you mentioned the price guide. The price guide was obviously a foundational figure in both Wizard magazine and in ToyFare. I'll be honest, I never really read any of the price guide, but I went through the price guide every month because that's where big shots were and mug shots and like where did some of and if you want to get into some of the really off color jokes, you can find them in the big shots. There is some stuff that is right on the edge. Like who put those together? How did those little vignettes come together?
I don't know who was doing them when I got there, but at one point it definitely was me pairing up toys in the back. I don't know if I did a lot of I don't know how inappropriate some of my setups were, but they definitely came up with managed. I'm sure that plenty of them managed. Plenty of the staffers managed to come up with inappropriate dialogue to go with the pictures.
Big shots worked in the old Marvel method, where back in the day, Jack Kirby would draw out an entire comic and Stan Lee would fill in the dialogue. In much the same way, big shots would start with a random photograph and end up with some of the most, well, let's just say, I'm not certain many of these could be printed today. While Big Shots was certainly a highlight, or low light, depending on your sense of humor, the magazine was stuffed with other monthly features. Historical retrospectives of past figure lines, complete with checklist, appeared as Toy Stories, something that definitely had a big impact on this channel. Readers would submit their own custom creations of figures they wanted to see produced in Homemade Heroes. And in depth interviews would take you behind the scenes of the action figure industry, giving you a glimpse behind the curtain available nowhere else. The first issue went in depth with Avi Arad, CEO of Toy Biz, and later issues would feature interviews with Hall of Fame sculptors like Phil Ramirez and Claiborne Moore. Even the Toddfather himself made the magazine. But few things created as much controversy as the monthly top 10 list. If you think scalpers and speculators are bad now, well, let me assure you, this is not a new phenomenon. I was pretty guilty myself when I almost knocked an old lady down in Walmart to get my hands on that elusive Harley Quinn figure. I asked Zach about how the top 10 list came together.
Something that was there from the very start and I think lasted throughout the entire run of the magazine was the monthly top 10 list. And
Oh yeah.
that thing could cause a run on the market. What was it like every month putting that list together? Were there fights? Were there battles about who should go where and things like that?
I don't remember a lot of battles. They were looking at the prices on eBay. They were seeing what things were going for. We had tools for searching eBay to see what the auctions were going for. Before that, I think we actually called up stores. We would actually call different toy stores around the country. And I remember there was actually a section where we would talk to stores and they would tell us what was selling really well at their store. But I think that was how the top 10 was done for a little while, at least.
But what would a toy magazine be without actual toys? And from the very start, each issue of Toy Fair offered an exclusive mail away figure. I picked up quite a few of these, beginning with the very first one, the Molten Man. The original, the OG Toy Fair exclusive figure was Molten Man. And this guy doesn't look too bad for being 27 years old. Now, Toy Fair did a ton of these kind of custom, not custom, but kind of exclusive 5-inch Toy Biz figures. And look, they were repaints. This is basically kind of a generic male body. You've got these crazy ankles with the bolts on there with some feet. I feel relatively confident in saying that's a Colossus head that's been repainted, and I have no idea what the thought process is with this articulation. I'm assuming it's like DJ Molten Man. However it works, this was the first. And hey, we didn't get another Molten Man figure for over 25 years, not until that huge like 5-pack from Amazon. And instead of just doing the golden plastic with the sort of mottled look, this guy is painted. Now, unfortunately, over time, his head doesn't quite match the rest of his body, but it's a Ditko villain. You're talking about one of the original Spidey villains from the original run, and I am all in with DJ Molten Man. It just so happens that the next one we're going to look at was the second Toy Fair exclusive, and that's the 5-inch Kitty Pryde as Shadowcat. Now, she's on just the normal female base. I have her on like hot glued onto a stand because this figure is in my 5-inch X-Men display. She is a vital part of the X-Men from growing up, and so I really want her there, which is why it is such a shame that, again, it took us over 25 years, over 20 years in the Marvel Legends line to actually get a Shadowcat Kitty Pryde. But for a simple repaint, look, man, they didn't cut any corners. You've got a soft goods blouse, you've got this belt. She has a really nice head sculpt. And of course, she has the typical articulation of the Toy Biz figures from that time. But she is a vital missing link in all of our X-Men collections. Keeping with the theme of completely necessary additions, we've got the Alpha Flight Guardian figure. So Alpha Flight was kind of just a one-off group of characters that were created by John Byrne when he and Chris Claremont were doing the X-Men. And in the 1980s, Marvel said, hey, we're going to do an Alpha Flight comic, and hey, John Byrne, we want you to do it. And I think basically just out of loyalty to the characters, he decided to, even though he thought they were just kind of throwaways. But this costume is absolutely not a throwaway. I have always loved basically Canada's version of Captain Canada, Guardian. He's so great with the maple leaf, and the red and white looks so strong. And this exclusive became so much more important when Toy Biz actually produced a series of Alpha Flight figures. And the only Guardian that was produced in this scale came as a Toy Fair exclusive. Now, he's basically just an angel figure repainted. I think that was where Angel's wings used to sort of clip in, but it completely works for the character. I've always loved that simple mask and how the white and the red just stand out against each other. One of my favorite character designs of all time. I have always been a huge Alpha Flight fan, and this is a vital 5-inch figure. I actually started reading Fantastic Four comics during John Byrne's run on the title when She Hulk took over for the Thing following Marvel's Superhero Secret Wars. So, this figure, which actually came if you purchased a subscription to Toy Fair, is another missing link to our collections. Now, we have gotten one 6-inch version of Jen in her Fantastic Four garb. That was a San Diego Comic Con exclusive, and it really hasn't been available to most people. I know just about everybody is hoping that that new She Hulk figure that came out this past year will get a redeco in her FF duds, particularly with the Fantastic Four movie coming up this summer. But until then, this has really been kind of the definitive Fantastic Four She Hulk, and it was only available through Toy Fair. But it wasn't just action figures that were available in the magazine. This is a mini bust of Steve Ditko's version of Spider-Man. This came from Randy Bowen, and you can see it's got the Randy Bowen initials carved in right there. And this was a mail away, just like the other figures. And this is one that I absolutely had to have. As a huge Steve Ditko Spider-Man fan, getting that classic early Ditko Spidey with the glasses, with the necktie, and then a very, very definitive Ditko look on this side. So this piece was limited to only 6,000. This one, as you can see, is number 456, dates back to 2001. And I actually keep this in my office. This mini bust is something that I have had near me ever since I got it, because I just think it really captures a definitive moment in Spidey's history.
Now, the magazine started with each month with an exclusive figure. That had to have been an incredibly difficult thing to organize month after month.
Yes, some of them were successful and some of them weren't. Like we did like a stealth Robotech figure that I think didn't do as well as it could have. And I don't know whose idea it was to do the Simpsons exclusives we did, but those did amazing. They were going for lots and lots of money. The radioactive Homer Simpson that glowed in the dark was very cool. The Pin Pals, where they all had the bowling shirts on, that was a crazy time to do the exclusives. But yeah, the old Toy Biz exclusives were great. Some of them were cool. They were all, most of them were repaints, but they were still, it was cool they existed, because back then getting a new Marvel character was a big deal.
Absolutely. And some of those are characters that actually still haven't been remade as action figures. I know one of the exclusives that I have is the Earth X female Venom. There was like a translucent figure. You held it up to the light and you could see through it, but it had like the Venom stripes all around it.
Yeah.
It was on that Toy Biz 5-inch female body, but with a completely new paint job and a translucent plastic. That thing is absolutely fabulous. Never been redone again.
We did like a Final Fantasy 12-inch figure based on the movie, the Final Fantasy of the Spirits Within, and it was one of the characters that wasn't in the main line. We worked with, Wizard magazine would, if it was popular in Wizard, if it had like, some sort of following, then we would say, oh, well, that's maybe something we should do.
But the lasting legacy of Toy Fair was Twisted Toy Fair Theater, originally called Twisted Mego Theater. Let's listen to Zach explain how goofing around in the office turned into a cultural phenomenon.
The Twisted Toy Fair Theater, which started out as a fun thing that they did in the Wizard offices, where they would Andrew Carden, one of the editors, he had a collection of Mego figures, just like yours on the shelf and behind you. And Pat would and other people would set them up and like make them do goofy things to each other. And then that turned into, when Toy Fair started, turned into that strip along the bottom, where Spider-Man taught you how to do the Macarena, and then Spider-Man was hunting Jawas with Thor's hammer. And then it's when they did the first full issue, they did that full strip. But that started out as just people goofing around in the office.
I cannot overstate just how incredibly clever these skits were. A personal favorite of mine was A Real American Hero from issue 40. It starts with Spidey nonchalantly slamming the door in Aunt May's face so that he can get back to watching TV with a perpetually drunk Iron Man, when all of a sudden, the forces of Cobra blast through his wall. As Cobra Commander tries to replace Spidey with Zartan, Spidey makes a joke about Iron Man peeing in his armor, when the Joe team parachutes in to save the day, with Spidey noting, "They're parachuting in from where exactly?" A classic Joe Cobra laser fight breaks out, with Spidey again aloofly observing the scene, until Duke utters the famous phrase, "Knowing is half the battle." then revealing the long kept secret that the other half is violence before firing a barrage of laser shots. Spidey reaches down to lower Duke's aim, instantly killing a Cobra trooper, causing horror on both the Joe and Cobra teams, saying that's not how we play. Meanwhile, Cobra Commander has taken the ashes of Uncle Ben and created Ben Serpentor, who exclaims, "Eat your wheat cakes." Just then, a random burglar races in, chased by the Mego Chips figures. He shoots Uncle Ben Serpentor, instantly killing him. With Ponch and John questioning why Spidey didn't simply stop the burglar, asking, has he no sense of responsibility? Spidey simply replies, it was better this way. He was incontinent. There must have been 30 jokes and 25 pop culture references over those 6 pages alone. Potty humor aside, this was witty stuff, and the more you knew about comics and action figures, the funnier it was. And none of this was by accident. The team put a ton of work into each skit.
Labor of love. We put a lot of work into it. The script went through multiple revisions. I did storyboards, so that would get approved by Pat. The script would get approved by Pat. Tom Root was the writer at first, and then Justin Ackland was the writer, the scripter. But we would have meetings. When I started there, it was all lunch meetings. We'd get together at lunch. We'd go out to a restaurant or something, and we'd sit down and we'd hash out the plots. We'd all bring suggestions, and we'd hash out one of the plots until we had, all the beats and stuff like that. And then somebody would come back and script it all.
The characters of Twisted Toy Fair Theater developed a life of their own and really had a consistency to them. One of the earliest customs that was in there was the Doctor Doom custom Mego, and he had that megalomaniacal, kind of core to the character from the comics, but just way over the top. The same with Thor with his speech pattern, and Hulk with his kind of just genial stupidity, and those remain constant throughout the entire run of the magazine, and you could count on them. When you saw Hulk, you knew that something dumb was going to happen. When you saw Doom, you knew he had some huge plot that was going to go awry. But maybe the character that sort of stepped out a little bit from his comic counterpart, but became like really maybe the central figure of the entire thing, was Spidey. And that Mego Spidey almost was like the Bugs Bunny character of everything, sort of kind of step back and just sort of watching it all happen and making snarky comments about it. Like, do you remember how that came about and how you guys managed to maintain the consistency of all of those characters?
Spider-Man was definitely, the star. And he definitely had this one generic person, not generic personality, but like a flat, like commentary personality. He didn't want to be involved in all the shenanigans. So like we would have these plots where we'd come up and like, well, what would Spidey do here? And he's like, well, he would walk away. He would leave. We did this whole strip for the 10th anniversary volume, which was him being kidnapped and put onto inside the actor's studio with I forgot the name of the host, but we made a figure of him. And it was just him trying to escape the whole time, just him trying to just get away, and they wouldn't let him go. And it was funny that he would try to remove himself from his own storylines, so frequently. But no, he was definitely one we had to be consistent with. Thor, Hulk, Doom. There were other characters. Wolverine was just sort of like a pop. We brought him in to get readers. It was a joke. The X-Men were brought in whenever they needed somebody to read the strip. Yeah, no, there were definitely some real characters there that I'm pretty proud of, and we even did it with other. And I didn't originate the character of Spider-Man by any means. He'd been around for 20 plus issues when I got there, but there's some that we did originate, which was like the Stormtroopers. We did a lot of strips with the Stormtroopers. It was Stormtrooper, Snow Trooper, Scout Trooper, and Sand Trooper, and they all had their own personalities, and it was amazing how successful I think we were at like making them all different from each other, even though they were all sort of the same, very similar in appearance.
Do you have a personal favorite strip from Twisted Toy Fair Theater?
For some reason, one of my favorites, and there's so many good Marvel ones, but one of my favorites was the Godzilla strip we did, where Godzilla came and was destroying Tokyo, but he didn't even realize he was doing it. And he was just sort of walking around and he got attacked by Mechagodzilla, and he's like, what is this? Where is this guy who looks like me coming from? And he and Mothra were just hanging out and talking. Him and Gamera were hanging out and talking, and it was just a funny strip. And it was I hadn't seen anything like that with Godzilla before. And I think it was pretty successful. But them going to the Kiss concert was one that I was pretty happy with too, just because that was one of my original stories.
Mego only made a limited number of characters back in the 70s. Where did all these figures come from?
We would make custom figures. I made a few customs myself. We'd also have these really talented customizers like Scott Fensterer, and they would make these like Wolverine. Mego was probably one of the first ones. That was Charlie Flatt, actually. Charlie Flatt was a very talented customizer. But it was a Wolverine, Claw, various Marvel characters who we thought would be funny to have in the strip, and so we would get people to make them like really good figures of Claw.
That was something that was obvious reading the magazine, was that all of a sudden DC characters stopped appearing in Twisted Toy Fair Theater. And I think at one point I remember a Twisted Toy Fair Theater where it was referenced that, DC's legal or whoever asked that they no longer be involved. Did they just not have a sense of humor about things?
I don't want to say that. I think they just were, a little bit more protective of their, intellectual property than maybe other companies were. There are definitely some that were not able to be reprinted in their entirety, especially the ones that had DC Comics characters in them, which were very often were some of the most inappropriate ones. But the DC editorial wasn't really feeling the whole making your own comic strips about Batman thing. So a lot of those strips ended up being revised when we reprinted them. But I think in most cases we managed to make them better by using Marvel characters and coming up with new jokes for them. I'm sure if we had done a lot of Godzilla strips, eventually Toho would have been, would have sent us a letter about it. But we only did one or two here and there. Hasbro, I think Hasbro probably has a decent sense of humor about their characters. Marvel was very, very generous to let us go as far as we did with all the Marvel characters, because there were plenty of inappropriate strips with them too.
The magazine was bursting with humor, so much so that it couldn't be contained within the pages.
And Tom Root, one of the original writers, Tom Root and Doug Goldstein and Matt Senreich, who were all ToyFare magazine and Wizard magazine staffers, they all went off and started Robot Chicken. So if you see where maybe the Robot Chicken, pushes the boundaries, they all started, back at Twisted Toy Fair Theater.
That's right. If you're a fan of Adult Swim's long-running show Robot Chicken, it all started in the pages of Toy Fair. Actor Seth Green, himself a huge collector, made custom figs of his fellow actors on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which led to him collaborating with the Toy Fair team on some big shots. Next thing you know, they loaded up the truck and moved to Beverly Hills, that is, stop-motion movie stars. I love Twisted Toy Fair Theater so much, I even tried to recreate my own in my recent video about Marvel Migos. Meanwhile, back at the Hall of Justice. Welcome, my super friends. Today I introduce our newest member, the Spider's Man. I was just looking for a bathroom.
He's so cute. Can we keep him, Batman? Please, huh? Please?
Okay, look, I got these 3 Goonie birds following me, so I'm just gonna drop the kids off at the pool, and I'm out of here. Great Scott! He's gone into the translocation chamber!
Let's see where he ended up. Looks like he's battling the Joker in Casablanca.
Oh, I hate DC Silver Age stories. Toy Fair's legacy is ever enduring, and if you'd like to see my full, uninterrupted interview with Zach, where we go into way more details and stories, click that join button because the whole thing is available to channel members. I'm going to let Zach sum up just how much Toy Fair meant to all those involved.
But for a while there, it was just a bunch of young guys just hanging out and having fun and making a magazine, which was, it was fun. Having an actual thing to hold in your hands at the end of the month was very rewarding. There are other jobs where you don't get something like that, but to be able to say, this is mine, I worked on this, I helped make this, was very, very rewarding.
That is awesome. Zach, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you for letting me go down memory lane.
Toy magazines still exist, like my current favorite, Toy Collector. but they need our support to survive in a digital world. If you still love the feeling of something in your hands, the ability to flip pages and really dig into in depth articles and vivid photography, head down to your local comic shop and pick up a copy of Toy Collector. And as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.